Moving on now, though, the alternate Manus Island accommodation is not yet ready for the approximate 600 refugees who are refusing to leave the now closed detention centre. That's according to the United Nations Refugee Agency, the UNHCR. The Guardian this morning is reporting there aren't enough beds or doctors, as well as no running water or electricity at some of the new accommodation. A spokeswoman for the UNHCR, Catherine Stubberfield, said substantive parts of the planned alternative accommodation are still not ready. If the 600 refugees and asylum seekers still in the regional processing centre were to leave it, existing alternative arrangements would not be sufficient for all of them. That's despite what we've been hearing from the Immigration Minister, Peter Dutton, in recent days. Let's get more on this story now. Joining us live is Kate Schuetze. She's Amnesty's International's Pacific researcher. Kate, I know you've just landed back in Australia. You've spent a week or so on Manus Island. Yesterday, the PNG Supreme Court ruled against the refugees who are trying to take legal action to get water and power turned back on at that detention centre. Where do you see this going from here? I mean, surely the 600 or so men can't continue to stay there for much longer without basic services.
Yeah, well, the situation is getting more dire day by day on Manus Island. We were up there around the 31st when this supposed transition was taking place. We did go out to each of the facilities up there. We weren't allowed access inside all of them, but you could clearly see that the new site is not ready to accommodate the new men. It's not yet secure with a perimeter fence. That was confirmed by our meetings with the PNG government. It seems to be only the Australian government that's peddling these lies, saying the centre is ready to accommodate for vast numbers of men, but they're still failing to address the primary concerns that the men have about moving closer to town, around the security and safety, but also the long-term plans in terms of the resettlement of many of these men who are now deemed to be refugees. Shuttling them from one centre to another around town does not solve the fundamental problems with these cruel policies.
Even if some of those facilities aren't quite completed yet, they do have on offer, we're being told from the government, these basic services: water, power, security, medical services. Surely the men would be safer at those new facilities where those services are on offer than the situation at the moment, which is that they're by themselves with no basic services in that old centre that isn't staffed at all by authorities.
Well, it's extraordinary that both the Australian and the Papua New Guinean governments have created this crisis in the Lombrum Centre. They're the ones who decided to move out and to block food and other services coming into the centre. The situation is getting more serious day by day. We're very concerned around the medical condition of some of the men. We're receiving updated reports on their conditions, and some of these men do need serious and ongoing medical care, but it seems like what UNHCR is saying is that those procedures aren't in place on Manus Island at all right now. So essentially what the Australian government is proposing is to shuttle them from one camp to another where food, water, sewerage and healthcare is grossly inadequate. So how is moving them around going to fix this problem? It's absolutely not. The current situation is unacceptable. It's extremely disappointing that the PNG court has chosen to not protect the refugees and the basic services that are essential to right to life. That case still needs to be appealed to see what comes of it. But day by day, the situation is getting worse. What we're calling on the Australian and Papua New Guinean governments to do is to urgently allow humanitarian assistance into the camp and to restore some of those services and to address the broader concerns of the men inside.
Can you see a way that a deal with New Zealand could happen to take these men without creating the so-called pull factors the government's worried about, or incentives for asylum seekers elsewhere to try their luck and come to Australia by boat, which, as we know, is a very dangerous proposition?
Well, what we've seen over the last 4.5 years is that Australia has repeatedly failed to meet its legal and moral obligations to refugees who came here seeking our protection. What we would like to see now is where Australia is failing to offer and provide that protection to refugees, that attempts are made to speed up the US settlement arrangement. There are extraordinary concerns as to whether the US will even take more men, and we still have the Australian government intervening and saying they won't take up this offer from New Zealand. Our concerns around that is that they're effectively effectively blocking avenues for these men to get the safety and the protection that they deserve as refugees and vulnerable men in that position. Of course, the first and the most obvious answer is that Australia could bring these people here immediately, but failing that, they should not be standing in the way of other countries offering some kind of humanity to these people. But whatever those solutions are, this cannot drag on for another 4 years.
Kate Schuetze from Amnesty, we appreciate you joining us with your insights after spending time there on Manus. Thank you for that. And Laura Jays, my colleague, will be interviewing the Immigration Minister Peter Dutton a bit later here on Sky News, so no doubt she'll be putting some of those claims and allegations to the Minister when she gets a chance to speak with him.